G'day, I'm Warwick and welcome back to another episode of the Principles of Training. Today the principle we're going to talk about is called isolate, separate and recombine. The success of doing anything technical with horses really depends on how well your basics are. And in an earlier episode we looked at the principle of they need to know the answer before you ask the question. And a lot of times when you're doing technical things, you take those perfect basics, so they know all the answers to it, and you start putting those things together. So that principle, they need to know the answer before you ask the question, is the fact that all those basics separately from each other need to be really good. But when you start putting them together is where you can run into trouble. And the principle of isolate, separate, recombine is really about the fact that if you're putting basics together, say it's just two basics, putting them together that work separately well from each other, when you put them together, whichever one is not working quite as good as the other one, what you will do, you will isolate which one it is, you will separate it from the two of them, you'll fix it, and then you'll recombine those back into the technical maneuver. So something that's a basic element of a lot of other technical things is a leg yield. So if I was to walk along here, put my leg here, I could move Bundy over like that. So that there is that's a simple basic that makes up a lot of other more technical things, but that in itself has a number of elements. And so if I'm going to do a leg yield on Bundy, he's going forward off my legs. I've got forward energy off my legs. If I close my fingers on these reins, Bundy should be engaging his body and rocking his weight back off of those reins. And so if I should be able to take those two things and put them both together at the same time right here. Okay, so I've got those two things happening. He also should be able to get off my inside leg. And so when I combine all three of those things, I should have quite a nice leg yield. So I've just got a little bit of contact on Bundy and I've got a little bit of leg on him going forward. So I'm just going to come around here and I'm going to do a leg yield towards the camera here. So I'll just put my left leg on and he should just move over like that. But sometimes when you're working on something as simple as a leg yield, one of those elements doesn't work. And so whichever element didn't work, you would isolate that element. You'd figure out in your head, you'd isolate in your head and go, okay, which one of these isn't working? You would then separate it from the rest of them and work on it solely, and then you'd recombine them. So there's three things that can go wrong in this leg yield. One is they don't get off your leg, okay? So if you were riding around like this, and you went to put this leg on to do a leg yield, and when you let me face the camera and I'll show you. So let's say I'm going along here and I put my leg on and nothing happens. Okay, he keeps walking, everything else stays the same, but he doesn't get off my leg. What you do goes, oh, okay, he's not getting off my leg, so I'm going to stop that, make him get off my leg. Come on, Bundy, get off my leg, please. Thank you very much. And then you'd go back and you'd try it again. If you tried it again, you put that leg on, he wouldn't get off your leg, you go, hang on, hey, come on, you've got to get off my, thank you very much. You'd isolate it, you'd fix it, and then you'd recombine. You'd put them all back together. So he's responsive to my hands, he's responsive to my both legs. Now I'm going to put my inside leg on. Oh, right there he moves over. So that would be one example of what could go wrong in a leg yield. Something else that quite often goes wrong in a leg yield is your horse runs through your hands. So when you put your leg on, they kind of move over, but they speed up. So in that case, you would isolate this and go, hey, can you pay attention? Thank you very much. Okay, so if they didn't get off your hands, you would make sure they got off your hands. You wouldn't be trying to leg yield and go forward at the same time. You would just get them off your hands. And the last one that tends to happen, probably not quite as much, but it tends to more happen in the haunches in and movements like that, but you will lose forward motion. And so if you were trying to do a leg yield, and you lost forward motion, so you came along here and you put your leg on and they kind of stopped, you would forget the leg yield, forget the contact, and you would get your forward motion back again. So I just mentioned the haunches in, and so if you're trying to do a haunches in, so haunches in, the horse's front feet should stay on the same line and their hind feet should leave the line, kind of like that. But when you go to do that, your horse has to do a number of things. He has to be able to move his hind end over off your leg. And for me, when I teach that, it would be in the disengage, which starts very early on, moving that hind end over off this leg. The other part of this they need to be able to do, you need to be able to hold their shoulders straight, and you need to be able to use your inside leg a bit, like in your leg yield, to help hold those shoulders straight. And so you've got, in the haunches in, you've got forward motion, you have got the shoulders being straight, but you've got the hip push to the inside. And so there's a lot of things going on in this one. If you run into trouble with this, once again, you've got to break it down. And so there's a number of things that could happen. Usually what tends to happen in the haunches in, for me at least, is those horses tend to fall in here. Their shoulder tends to drop. And if you think about it, my hands and this leg, this inside leg, should be holding those shoulders up. And so a lot of times, and I've struggled with this with Bundy on this left side, if I put my right leg back, and that starts to happen. So right now, see his front feet have left that line and his shoulder dropped in, okay? So if that happened, he's moving over off this leg. I don't need to get him over off this leg here more. I need to fix this. So it would isolate my leg yield part of this and get that working again. I'll wander around here and walk towards the camera and show you what that looks like. So, like I showed you right then, they can have their shoulders fall in. So what I would do here, and I'll let him do it wrong so I can show you what I do to fix it. I'm going to walk along here, I'm going to put my right leg back, and right here, if he started to fall in like that, I would then quit that, do a leg yield this way, and then go back and recombine them all. And if he fell in again, I would quit that, leg yield this way, until, I'll do it away from the camera, until I could wander along here, slide this leg back, his front feet stay on that track, and his hind feet move over and off that track. Something else they will tend to do a lot in a leg yield type thing, most of the lateral movements, is they will lose forward motion. Okay, and you've got to have good energy going forward. So if I put my leg here and he kind of did this, I would forget about all of this lateral stuff and go, let's go. Get my forward back again. And if you think about an earlier episode that I talked about, anticipation is your best friend or your worst enemy, if you can get to anticipate that they may have to push forward like that, you'll see that they'll have a great deal more energy in that lateral movement. So I might do it here with Bundy a couple of times just to show you, so we could see what he looks like at the start of it and what he looks like when he starts to anticipate that forward motion right there. So I'm just going to walk along here. So what I'm going to do is, remember, in anticipation is your best friend or your worst enemy. If you want them to anticipate stuff, they have to be put together. They have to connect one thing with the next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk along, ask him to do a haunches in immediately followed by a fast trot forward. And I'll do that a few times. Let's have a look at what his baseline is. See how much energy he's got when I put this leg on here. And his energy levels didn't really change, and he's almost dying just a little bit, isn't he? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my leg on and then shoot him forward. Okay? Just come back to a trot and then to a walk. Now I'm going to put my right leg on, move him over and shoot him forward. Okay? Bring him back to a walk, put my right leg on and shoot him forward. I'll do it one more time. So I'm going to walk along, put my right leg back. Ooh, see that right there? He almost picked up a jog right then. He's got a lot of energy. See, he's carried himself a whole lot better. That's anticipation. So it's the principle of anticipation is your best friend or your worst enemy, but it's also the principle of isolate, separate, and recombine. So I've just talked about the leg yield and the haunches in, and those are two things you can use. Those are two technical things you can use to be the building blocks of a good canter departure. And so if I was to ask for a canter departure, I would want, when I put my right leg back, I'd want him to move his hip over and off my right leg a little bit. But he also should hold his shoulders up off my left leg. And a lot of times in canter departures, a horse will tend to drop their shoulder in when you're working on a structured canter departure. So if they did that, I'll just go for a bit of a trot here on Monday. If I was to ask him to canter right now and he fell in like that, let me do it towards it. If he kind of fell in like that, I would not canter and I would do a leg yield over there, and then I would try again. If I tried to canter and he fell in like that, I would not canter. I'd isolate which part wasn't working, which was the falling in. We're not worried about the canter. If he canters and falls in, we don't have to worry about the canter. He canters. He knows how to canter. The canter part's working. You need to isolate the part that's not working, which would be that falling in. So if I was trotting around here and I asked for a canter right now, and that wasn't too bad, but he's falling a little bit. I'm just going to break him to a trot and leg yield over there. Now I'll try again. Now right then he just sped up a little bit, okay? He kind of ran through my hands a little bit. So which part did I isolate that time? The first time I isolated this shoulder. This rib cage and shoulder kind of fell in, so I isolated that, separated it. I isolated it, figured out which one it was, separated it, fixed it, then I went to put them back together. The second time I went to put them back together, he rushed forward through my hands. So I said, no, you don't want to rush through my hands. My hands need to work like that. Very good. Okay, so then we could go back and try again. So I'll ask him to canter right here. And right there, he just canters off quite nicely. I'll just come back to a trot and try that again. Okay, I'll ask him to canter again. Put my outside leg back. And right then he kind of rushes a little bit. He kind of just sped up. Now, as I'm backing him up right here, he's backing up crooked. His rib cage is sticking out over this way. So this back up is supposed to be straight. So what part of my back up is not working? Is he not getting off my hands, or is his body not straight? His body's not straight. So I'm going to isolate which part it is. It's this rib cage is sticking out. So I'm going to separate it. I'm going to do a leg yield over here. Then I'm going to recombine and see if I can get him to back up. And right now he feels like he's backing up a lot straighter with a lot better bend in his body. So then we'll try this canter departure again. I might try it from a walk. So I just like him to. Now, what's happening here? I don't have enough forward. So I'm going to get some forward. And Bundy's a bit fresh this morning. And he goes, whoa, okay? But I didn't have enough forward for my canter departure. So I forgot all the rest of it, got the forward back. Okay, I isolated in my head which one it was. It's not the forward. I don't have enough forward, so I just got the forward. I don't care if he picks up a left lead or a right lead or what he does. He almost picked up a left lead then because he was half thinking left. Now I'll go ahead and I'll try that again. I'll put my left leg back and he falls in. I'm going to do a little leg yield over here. Now I'm going to ask again. Picks up the wrong lead. It's all right, I'll ask again. And right there he just canters off pretty much straight right in front of me. Bring it back to a trot. I might go the other way and see how we go. So I'm trotting around here. I'm going to ask him to canter. And right there he's pretty much, I mean he's not great yet, but it's pretty much a straight sort of a canter. What he used to do was he would want to fall in there. So I've done a lot of that. When he falls in, isolate that part that's falling in, move it over and go again. So I've just talked about a canter departure, which is something quite technical, and that two of the things that help with that canter departure are your haunches in and your leg yield, and they are kind of tools you'll use to fix problems that pop up there. But I want to address the haunches in, and you're probably thinking, well, how did you make that thing? Well, that thing was quite easy. It was made out of two very simple things that I teach horses in the first place. And in an earlier episode, you would have seen where I talked about how earlier on I teach those horses to laterally flex, okay, both ways. So they're really good off this rein, they're really good off this rein. And then I want to be able to disengage them. Put my leg on and have them move over and off my leg. I use those two tools to teach this, and and I'll show you how, if you get those working really, really well, I'll show you how simple it can be. And what I do is I use those two things along a fence. So I'll just walk along here, and I'm just going to tip his nose into the fence, which is lateral flexion, and slide my leg back, which is disengaging, and it turns from a forward motion into a lateral motion quite easily. I'll show you going back this way. So I'm just going to walk along here, I'm going to tip his nose to the fence and slide my leg back, and that forward motion turns into a lateral motion like that quite easily. And it should work like most everything, especially with the whole they need to know the answer before you ask the question principle. It should work the first time, almost the first time you do it. And here's a short clip of the first day a couple of years ago when I first started teaching this to Bundy. So what I'm going to do here to teach this horse to side pass, I'm going to walk along this fence, and I'm going to basically use the tools we've got so far to teach this next step. All my training involves creating a tool, maybe creating two tools, and then putting them together to teach them something else. And this one's no different. So he can follow the fence. So he'll go along this fence without me having to hold him on the fence. He can disengage. And he also laterally bend. And I'm going to use all three of those to try to teach this side pass. So all I'm going to do is just walk along the fence like this. So I want to have the whip on the same side as the fence. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip his nose towards the fence at the same time as I put my right leg back, like I'm trying to, just like I'm almost like trying to bend him to a stop, but the fence is in the way. So I'll just show you what I mean here. So I'm just going to reach down this, reach down this right rein here, bend his nose towards the fence, put my right leg back, and right there he just steps, he almost was going to bend to a stop. See, he went the other way. No big deal, okay? But you see, as he did that, that hind end stepped over there. And at this point in time, I don't care if he sticks his head over the fence. If we had a taller fence, it would be better, but we don't. I haven't taught this horse to back up yet, so I can't pull him back off there. I'm not going to be using two reins in this exercise. So now I'm just going to walk off again, but there's a big thing I want to mention here is how you get out of this little spot right here can help your spin later on, okay? So you can do one or two things. You can drag his head like this, and see right there his hind end kind of steps over and you can walk off, and I'll show you next time what I would rather do. So I'm just going to walk along here again, slide my right hand down that rein, put my right leg back, tip his nose this way, and right there he steps over. And that was just off my leg. That was really good. I didn't have to use the whip. I'm still carrying this whip to back my leg up if in case I need to. Now when I put my leg on then, I didn't push with all my might. I just laid that leg. If he didn't get off that, then I would tap him with this whip. So now I've got to turn and go this way. So what I'm going to do here right now, instead of just pulling that rein, having him swing his bum out, I'm going to start to teach him the beginnings of, or one of the beginnings of the spin. So what I'm going to do, if you think about, we've followed the fence around, and if that horse has gone along the fence and came off the fence, we'd pick up on the fence side rein and tap on the shoulder with this whip on the other side till he moved over. Well, I'm going to help right here. I'm going to pick up my left rein like that. Now I'm not going to pull with it, I'm just going to pick up on it like that, tap with this whip here, and right there those front feet stepped over without his hind end swinging the other way. So that's a pretty important thing that can help you out in this spot. Okay, so I'm just going to slide my hand down, tip his nose towards the fence, slide my right leg back, and right there he steps over. Perfect. He hasn't done this before, but that there's about as perfect as it can get. They can run their shoulder off, or they can not move over off your leg. If they ran their shoulder off that way, all you do is pick up on your right rein there. You know, if you're going, yeah, right rein. So if you're heading down here and you pulled his head and he kind of hung his shoulder, just take your rein further back this way and slow that front end down. If you tipped his nose and you put this leg back here and he didn't speed up, you could use your whip. Okay, so now I'm just going to pick up on this left rein like this. It's hooked around that post. I'm just going to tap on this right shoulder here, and right there, see, he moved his front feet over and walked off, and he actually almost pivoted on that left hind foot without swinging his hind end out. So now I'm just going to slide my right hand down, tip his nose into the fence, and right there he didn't really, there we go. I was going to say he didn't really get off my leg quite enough, so I just gave a little tap right there. Once again, like I said, I'm not terribly concerned about the fact his head's hanging over the fence at this point in time. I'm just going to pick up on that left rein, tap with this whip right here, and right there he steps those front feet over. I'll try it again. Tip his nose towards the fence, put my right leg back, and right there he moves over. Oh, he's going to go the other way. I'll just tip him back this way. tap with that whip. There we go. So now I'll just pick up on that left rein, tap with my whip, he steps over there. I'll just go ahead and tip his nose towards the fence, put my right leg back, and his hind end's not catching up to his front end, so I'm tap with that whip until he moves over. Do you see he got a little mad right there? No big deal. Now he doesn't want to stand here. I'm just going to point his nose towards the fence. Good. That's interesting because I've tapped him with the whip quite a bit, you know, disengaging him and making him go forward and stuff, and he has never done that. So who knows where that came from, but anyway, no big deal. Now I'm just going to go this way again. Pick up in that left rein, tap that whip, he moves that front foot over. You'll find that after a little while, you'll pick up on that rein, they'll move that front foot on their own. So I'll just tip his nose towards the fence, lay that leg on him right there. He doesn't really move over as much as I want. There we go, he moves over. I'll let go. So when you tap that there, make sure that you don't let him run that front end off. So right then when I tap, I probably pulled slightly more on this rein right here. Now just pick up on that left rein, tap with this whip right here, he steps over and off we go again. So as you saw right there, because his lateral flexion was good and his disengaging were good, that movement worked out quite easily the first time I ever did it. And I didn't really have to make too many corrections, but if I did, the corrections I would make would be depending on which thing wasn't working. If I walked along here and as I went to tip his nose into the fence, he kind of dove around like that, dove this way and didn't bend very well, I'd forget the disengage and I would come along here and practice taking my hand out to the side and getting him to bend around here and get soft. And then I would go along the fence, take my hand out to the side, bend him around here till he got soft. And once I got that bit working, then I'd go back and I would pick up there, he would bend, I'd slide my leg back and my lateral movement would come from that. So that's if this part wasn't working, I'd figure out in my head, I'd isolate it, then I'd separate it, fix it and recombine it. Now if the hind end wasn't working, if I went along here and I bent his head and I put my leg on and he didn't really move over, I would go back to my disengaging and go, hey, remember this? We did this earlier on, you've got to get off my leg. Thank you. And then I would just go back along the fence and I'd recombine it. I'd put my hand here and put my leg here and that worked just fine and I would leave it alone. But I would just break it down and figure out which part wasn't working, separate it, fix it, and then recombine the two. So this principle of isolate, separate, and recombine is not just for little things like the beginnings of teaching a lateral movement on the fence. It applies to all the big things, and especially to the big things. You know, in dressage, one of the more technical movements would be a canter pirouette, and really, basically, a canter pirouette is a really good, engaged, collected forward canter, and the ability to go in circles and spiral it down. And basically, you take that canter, you take the forward and you take the spiral and you start putting them together. And when you start spiraling down, at some point in time, what will happen is you will start to lose forward. And when you start to lose that forward, what you'll do is you'll have to forget the spiral part, you'll ride forward and come back out of it again. And so that's a dressage thing, but my background in the reining, a lot of people teach the spin exactly the same way. So I'm going to walk around here and show you a little exercise we do with the reiners to start to teach the spin. And they've got to have forward motion and lateral motion at the same time. That's what you're trying to get. A spin is a forward motion thing, it's not a backward motion thing. And so if I'm going to walk Bundy around here, and what I want you to watch is his inside hind foot. Okay, so he's walking around here and see how much his inside hind foot is tracking forward? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to spiral this down and you'll see his inside hind foot will go less and less distance. Okay, so that's a circle, I'm not spiraling yet. So I'm going to start to spiral in now, and you see that inside hind foot is going less forward and less forward and less forward, and now it's actually, see, it's backing up right now. And so what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to have forward and lateral at the same time, and I get more and more lateral, but the more and more lateral I get, the more forward I lose. And so I'll show you what you do to correct that. So if you think about this, we've got isolate. So in our head we have to do, what is he doing that's not working? Is it the moving over his shoulders, or is it the pushing forward from behind? And it's the pushing forward from behind that he lost right then. So what do? We forget the lateral part and we get the forward back again. So I'll just show you again. I'm going to walk around here and I'm going to spiral around, and that spiral is getting smaller and his inside hind foot's traveling less distance. Right now it's backing up, so what would I do? I'd go forward again. And then I would just come and I would come back around here, and I've got forward and I've got spiral, and I'm just spiraling around, and we stuck back there. I would go forward again. I'd walk around here, just start to spiral in. Right there, it stepped backwards. We'll just step forward again. And so it's just, now if I didn't have the spiral, if he wasn't moving over off my hands, I might say, hey, get over here off my hands. But that part's working fine. It's the part of his having forward motion that I keep losing. So whenever I lose that forward motion, I have to isolate it from the rest of the exercise. Mentally, I have to figure out what it is, then I have to separate it and fix it, and then I come back and I start to recombine the forward with the over. Right, now we're starting to suck back a little bit with it. I would just go forward again. And teaching horses to spin, there's just lots of forwards, go in, come out. Forwards, go in, come out. I'll just try it again. I'm going to wander around here, just ask him to spiral in. He starts to turn, and right now he's sucking back a little bit. I would just walk him forward and out of there. So once again, the principle of isolate, separate and recombine, that was it right there. A lot of these principles of training are kind of crossover principles, and right now I'm going to show you an exercise we do to teach these young reining horses to come to a stop off the word whoa. And one of the reasons we teach them to stop off the word whoa is because there's nothing for them to brace on. You're not picking up with your hands, so there's nothing for them to pull on. And if you think about how you'd like a horse to stop, you'd like him to stop with his weight on his hind end and his front feet kind of active. You don't want him to stop on his front end. So what we will do, teaching that, is we will walk down the fence here, and I would say the word whoa, and he's probably going to stop. But if he didn't, if I walk down here and I say the word and he doesn't stop, I would then just tip his nose into the fence. So I pick up here, tip that there, go the other way. Then I walk down here, I would say that word. If he didn't stop, I would just tip his nose into the fence and go the other way. And if you think about what happens when I tip his nose into the fence, his hind feet stop moving, he rocks his weight back, but his front feet stay active. I'll show you again, just watch his hind feet and his front feet. So if I walk down here and I said that word and I tipped his nose into the fence right here, his weight's on his hind feet, his weight's off his front feet, and off we go again. If I went along here and I said that word and he didn't stop, I would just tip his nose in the fence, his weight's on his hind feet, his weight's off his front feet, and off we go. And so there's a lot of principles in that. One of the principles of that is you're making the wrong thing hard and the right thing easy. That was the very first principle of training we talked about. And right then, the wrong thing would be being on your front end, okay? It's hard to make that turn on your front end. You've got to shift your weight off your front end. If you tried this out away from the fence, they could do the wrong thing easily. They could walk a big old U-turn. You know, if you said that word and you picked up on this rein, they could just kind of waller around like that, which means you'd be making the wrong thing, leaning forward, you'd be making it easy. But if you come over here by the fence and you ask them to turn to the fence, right here, leaning forward would be hard, and doing the right thing, shifting your weight back, would be quite easy. So there's the principle of making the wrong thing hard and the right thing easy. And if you think about what two parts this little exercise is made up of, it's made up of forward motion, and it's made up of lateral flexion. All I'm doing is I'm going to walk along with forward motion. I'm going to ask my horse basically to flex laterally into the fence while he's walking, and then I'm going to use forward motion to come out of it. So I'm going to walk down here, tip his nose in the fence, and right here I'm just going to ride him forward and he pushes off out of it. So we're using those two parts right there. If for some reason this didn't work, if it was being horrible, one of those two things wouldn't be working, okay? I'll show you the two things that would probably not work, and I'll go with the most common one, and the most common one is the horse doesn't have any forward motion, so they go down here and they don't push off coming out of there. So if you walk down here and I'm going to make him do it wrong with my legs, but if you tipped your horse's nose into the fence and he just kind of stood on his front feet and swung his hind end out like this, I guarantee he's not prepared to push off right here. So how you would fix that, the thing you would isolate, then separate it and fix it, would be the forward motion. So you want to make sure, whoa, I can get forward motion. And if I can get forward motion separately from that, then what I would do is I would come down here, and if my horse swung his hind end out, so if I walked down here and I went to tip his nose in the fence and he swung his hind end out, watch what this horse's hind feet do. If I said right here, I said, go forward, yeah, and you see right then his hind feet kind of shot up underneath him a little bit. Okay, I'll just show you what it looks like. I'll do it a couple of times. I'm going to walk down here, tip his nose in the fence, and I'm going to have him go forward. Then I'm going to walk down here, I'm going to tip his nose into the fence, and right here, make him push forward. Walk down here, tip his nose into the fence, make him push forward. And after a while they start to anticipate, there's that our friend anticipation again, they start to anticipate that when I tip his nose into the fence, whoa, he's got a lot more energy to him. Does that make sense there? So what you would do there is you would isolate the go forward part. But let's go back to the principle of they need to know the answer before you ask the question. If you can't get forward out here, if you can't just ride your horse along and go, boom, get some energy, very subtly get some energy, you wouldn't try to use it over there because you don't have it. They need to know the answer before you ask the question. So that would be if they were swinging their hind end out. But the other part is, and Bundy did it a couple of times then, he got a bit, because he was thinking about pushing off too much, he didn't have enough bend, and I'd like him to have some bend. So if I walked down here and I went to tip his nose into the fence and he got too stiff like that, I would just stay here and go, hey, I want some bend. Very good, there's our bend, excellent. Then I'd go back over here and I'd ask for the whole thing again. I'd ask him to turn to the fence, and right here he didn't bend enough. I would stay here until he bent as much as I wanted. Then I'd let him wander back down here again. And so I've only got to have two things happen. I've got to have the bend and the forward. I'm going to pick up here and, oh, I've got bend and I've got forward. Very nice. Walk down here, pick up on this rein, I've got bend. Didn't have enough forward right then. I'll wander back down there and try that one again. But so we had bend, didn't have forward. So instead of trying to keep the bend and get the forward at the same time, I separated the two. I just got the forward. Now I'll go back and I'll try it again. So I'm just going to walk along here, tip his nose into the fence. Still didn't have a whole lot of forward. He wasn't, I don't know if you heard him grunt right then, but when I said go forward, he kind of went, oh, I wasn't prepared for that. So I'm just going to walk along here again. Just tip his nose into the fence, he bends and whoa, and pushes off. You see how much he used his hind end that time? And so, once again, that's the principle of, there's a couple of principles in that one. There's a couple of principles in every training thing, but that was making the wrong thing hard and the right thing easy. That was the exercise I was doing. Before I did the exercise, I worked on, they need to know the answer before you ask the question. So I had those parts working before I ever tried to put them together. Had those two. And then, when it didn't work, I worked on the principle of isolate, separate, and recombine. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how the principle of isolate, separate, and recombine works. Don't forget to join us next time and we'll look at another principle of training.